Never liked these kinds of nights. My name is Caleb Reed. I'm 30 years old and I fix things for a living. Not the glamorous kind of fixing, nothing that involves boardrooms or corner offices. I work for a company that handles maintenance for hotels, restaurants, and event centers. If the lights go out, the AC dies, the automatic doors stop working, or the industrial kitchen suddenly goes haywire, people call us. I show up, I repair what's broken, and then I leave. No small talk, no handshakes that last too long. Just the work. That was me. Quiet, reliable, forgettable in the best way possible. So when my manager told me I had to attend the charity gala at Monroe Grand Hotel, I tried to get out of it. I told him I wasn't good at these things. I told him I didn't own a suit that fit right. He said it didn't matter. The new ownership group wanted to meet the contractors, and our company needed to make a good impression. A few guys from the team were going, including Clinton Brooks. Clinton was the kind of guy who thought expensive cologne could cover up a cheap personality. He talked loud, laughed louder, and always made sure everyone knew he was in the room. We didn't get along, never had. He hated that I didn't need to perform to get respect from clients. I hated that he needed to. I planned to stay for exactly 1 hour, long enough to be seen, short enough to escape. The hotel ballroom was exactly what you'd expect from a place trying to prove it belonged to the new money crowd. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters in black vests moving like ghosts. The event was raising money for families who lost their homes in a string of fires that hit the city last month. Noble cause. I respected that. But the people in the room? Most of them were there to be seen being generous, not to actually feel anything. I grabbed a glass of water from the bar and stayed near the back wall. That was my spot. Close enough to look present, far enough to breathe. Then I saw her. She was sitting alone at a round table near the center of the room. Champagne-colored dress, simple but elegant. Brown hair falling just past her shoulders. She sat perfectly straight, hands resting on her lap, like someone who had learned a long time ago that good posture could hide a lot of things. No one was talking to her. No one was pulling up a chair. A few people walked past and glanced, then leaned in to whisper to whoever was next to them. I heard a woman behind me say softly, "She still has the nerve to show up here?" A man answered, "After what happened back then. Some people really have no shame." I didn't know who she was. I didn't know what back then meant. But I recognized the look on her face. It was the look of someone who had already decided the night was going to hurt and had prepared herself for it. That was when Clinton spotted me. He was standing at the bar with 2 other guys from the maintenance crew, already on his second or third drink. His tie was too tight, his smile too wide. The second he saw me, his face lit up like he'd just been handed a gift. "Caleb!" he called out, loud enough that a few heads turned. "Perfect timing. We found the perfect person for you tonight." I felt my shoulders tense. He pointed across the room, straight at the woman in the champagne dress. A couple of the guys at the bar chuckled. Not loud, just enough. Clinton kept going, making sure his voice carried. "You spend all day fixing broken things, right? Well, she's been broken for years. The whole city knows it. You two should get along great." More laughter. Still quiet, but sharp, like little knives. I looked at the woman again. Her fingers tightened around the napkin on the table, but she didn't lift her head. She didn't flinch. She just sat there, taking it. Like she'd taken it 100 times before. Something in my chest pulled tight. Clinton wasn't done. "Go on, Caleb. Sit with her. It's not like anyone else is going to. Poor thing's been sitting there like a statue all night." The room was watching now. Not everyone, but enough. They wanted to see what I would do. They expected me to laugh it off or make an excuse or walk away and pretend I hadn't heard. I looked at her again. She still hadn't moved. And in that moment, I understood something. She was ready for me to leave. Ready for one more person to choose the easy way out. Ready to sit there alone until the night ended and she could finally go home. I didn't want to be that person. I walked across the floor. The sound of my shoes on the marble felt too loud. When I reached her table, I didn't sit across from her like a normal person would. Instead, I pulled out the chair next to her, lifted it, and set it down right beside her, close enough that our elbows almost touched. Then I sat down. I turned my body toward the bar where Clinton and his friends were still standing, and I looked straight at him. "If it's that funny," I said, my voice calm but clear enough to carry, "say it louder. Let everyone hear." The laughter died instantly. The entire section of the room around the bar went quiet. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. I kept my eyes on Clinton. Whispering doesn't make the words less ugly. It just proves you know exactly how ugly they are. No one spoke. I could feel the woman beside me shift slightly. For the first time since I'd entered the ballroom, she turned her head and looked at me. Her eyes were steady, tired but steady, and in them I saw something crack open. Just a little. Like she hadn't expected anyone to push back, not for her. I didn't smile, I didn't say anything else. I just sat there next to her while the rest of the room tried to figure out what had just happened. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel like I was in the wrong place. The silence after I spoke didn't last long, but it stretched long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Clinton stood there with his glass halfway to his mouth, the smirk frozen on his face like someone had pressed pause on him. His two friends suddenly found their drinks extremely interesting. A few people at nearby tables glanced over, then quickly looked away, pretending they hadn't been watching the whole thing. I didn't turn back to face Adelaide right away. I wanted to give her space. I also wanted a second to steady my own breathing. I wasn't the type to make scenes. I fixed broken systems. I didn't break the ones that were working. But something about the way she had been sitting there, taking it all without a single word of defense, had pushed me past the point of just observing. I finally looked at her. She was already watching me. Her eyes were calm, but there was a tiredness in them that went deeper than one bad night. Like she had been tired for years. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, keeping my voice low so only she could hear. "You didn't deserve that." She studied me for a moment, then replied in an even softer voice, "Neither did you." Her words caught me off guard. I expected her to be angry or embarrassed, or at least distant. Instead, she sounded like someone who had already accepted that people would be cruel and had stopped being surprised by it. I glanced around the table. The empty seats, the half-finished glasses, the way the other guests at our table had subtly shifted their chairs a little farther away without making it obvious. "Do you want to leave?" I asked. "I can walk you out. No one would blame you." Adelaide looked out across the ballroom for a long second. The chandeliers were too bright. The music was too soft. Everything felt like it was trying too hard. Then she shook her head. "No," she said. "I've walked out of too many rooms already." The way she said it made me wonder how many times she had done exactly that. How many nights she had chosen to disappear rather than sit through another performance of people pretending they were better than her. So we stayed. The first few minutes were awkward in the way that only forced proximity can be. I didn't know what to say. She didn't seem like she wanted small talk, but I also didn't want to sit there in complete silence, like we were both waiting for the night to end. I picked up the menu that had been left in front of me and pretended to study it. "The salmon looks overcooked," I said. Adelaide turned her head slightly. "It probably is. They always are at these things." I glanced at her. "You come to a lot of these?" "Used to," she answered. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the distance in it. "Now I mostly just get invited out of obligation." I nodded. I didn't push. I figured if she wanted to talk, she would. If she didn't, that was fine too. I was good at being quiet. But after a while, she surprised me. "My family used to own hotels," she said, almost like she was talking to herself. "Small chain. Nothing like this place, but we did all right. My father was good at the business side. My mother handled the people. I was supposed to take over one day." She paused, tracing the rim of her water glass with one finger. Then one of his partners decided he wanted more. Cooked the books, drained the accounts. By the time my father found out, it was too late. He had a stroke 6 months later. Died before he could see what was left of everything he built. I stayed quiet. I didn't offer the usual "I'm sorry" that people throw out when they don't know what else to say. It felt cheap. Adelaide continued, her voice still calm. "My mother got sick after that. The stress, the lawyers, the debt collectors, it was too much. I was 22 when I started working in the laundry room of a hotel we used to partner with. Folding sheets, washing towels, trying not to think about how I used to walk through those same hallways as the owner's daughter." She let out a small breath that might have been a laugh if it hadn't sounded so tired. "Then there was the accident. Car accident. I was in the hospital for weeks. physical therapy for months after. People in this city have long memories and short attention spans. They started calling me things: the fallen heiress, charity case, the girl who used to be someone. She finally looked at me directly. "The worst part isn't the pity," she said. "It's watching people use that pity to feel good about themselves. Like helping me or pretending to care makes them noble. It doesn't. It just makes them feel better about stepping over people like me on their way to the top." I let her words sit between us for a moment. Then I said the only thing that felt honest. "I don't know your past," I told her, "but I don't think you need to know someone's entire history to treat them like they matter." Adelaide stared at me. For a second, I thought I had said the wrong thing, that maybe I had been too blunt or too simple. But then something shifted in her expression. The guarded look she had been wearing all night cracked just a little more. "You always talk like that?" she asked. "Like what?" "Like you're not trying to impress anyone." I smiled, small and a little self-conscious. "Probably because I know I'm not very good at it." That almost made her smile. Not quite, but close. The corner of her mouth lifted for half a second before she caught it. Around us, the room had started to move again. People were eating, talking, laughing at other tables. But our little corner felt separate, like we had created our own quiet space in the middle of all the noise. I realized then that Clinton had lost. He wanted to turn her into a joke, a punchline, something to laugh at so he could feel bigger. But sitting here, listening to her speak like this, I saw something else entirely. A woman who had been through hell and still showed up, still held her head up, still refused to let them win by running away. And for the first time since I walked into this ballroom, I didn't feel like I was just passing through. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Clinton didn't like being ignored. I could feel him watching us from the bar even after the laughter died. He kept shifting his weight, swirling the bourbon in his glass like he was trying to decide whether to let it go or double down. Guys like him never let things go, not when their pride was on the line. Adelaide and I had fallen into a quiet rhythm. We weren't talking much anymore, but the silence between us didn't feel empty. It felt like we had both decided the rest of the room didn't deserve our attention. That was enough for me. Then I heard footsteps. Clinton was walking toward our table, glass in hand, that same forced smile stretched across his face. His eyes were sharper now, meaner. The alcohol had loosened whatever filter he usually pretended to have. "Caleb," he said, stopping a few feet away. His voice was loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "I gotta say, I'm impressed. You really leaned into the role fast." I set my knife and fork down slowly. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. Clinton turned his attention to Adelaide. His smile widened, but there was nothing friendly in it. "And you," he said to her. "I have to give you credit. You're putting on quite a show tonight. Almost believable. For a second there, I almost forgot you were the girl this whole city used to feel sorry for." A few people at nearby tables stopped mid-conversation. The air around us shifted. Adelaide's hand moved to her water glass. I saw her fingers tighten around it, the tendons in her wrist standing out. But her face stayed perfectly still. Clinton kept going, his voice dropping into something uglier. "Or maybe you two actually make sense together. A maintenance guy with nothing going for him and a woman who had everything and lost it all. Sounds like a perfect charity story, doesn't it?" The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were clever, because they were designed to wound. And they did. I stood up. I didn't slam my hands on the table. I didn't raise my voice. I just pushed my chair back and rose to my full height. I was taller than Clinton by a few inches, and for the first time that night, I used it. "I'm only going to say this once," I told him. He smirked. "Oh, are you about to give me a lecture?" "I don't need to lecture you," I said. "I just need to make sure you hear me clearly so you don't misunderstand later." I looked around at the people pretending not to watch. Then I looked back at him. I didn't sit here because I felt sorry for her. I sat here because she's the only person in this entire room who got insulted tonight and still kept her dignity. The words landed. I could see it in the way a few people shifted in their seats, in the way some of the laughter from earlier had completely evaporated. Clinton's face flushed. He tried to laugh it off, but it came out strained. "You really think you're the good guy here, huh?" I don't think I'm better than anyone, I answered. I just don't want to be the kind of man who looks back on a night like this and feels ashamed of what he did. That one hit deeper. I saw it in his eyes. For a split second, the mask slipped. But Clinton wasn't finished. He never knew when to stop. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice just enough that the people at the next table could still hear every word. Be honest, Caleb. If you had any other option tonight, would you really still be sitting next to her? There it was. The trap. If I hesitated, Adelaide would hear it as doubt. If I answered too fast, it would look like I was performing for the crowd. Either way, she lost. I turned my head and looked at her first. Not because I needed permission, because I wanted her to know that whatever I said next was for her, not for Clinton or anyone else in the room. She met my eyes, calm, waiting, like she had already prepared herself for whatever answer I was about to give. I turned back to Clinton. Yes, I said. One word, clear, loud enough for half the room to hear. I would still sit here. Clinton blinked. For the first time all night, he didn't have a comeback ready. I continued, my voice steady. Not because I know who she is. Not because I'm trying to prove anything to you, but because when I saw someone being turned into a joke, I didn't want to be the person who sat back and let it happen. The silence that followed was different from the one earlier. This one felt heavier, like the air itself had changed. I heard a woman at a nearby table quietly set her wine glass down. An older man at another table looked down at his plate like he suddenly couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Even some of the people who had laughed at Clinton's first joke were now avoiding his gaze. Clinton opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And then the side door near the back of the ballroom opened. A man in his late 50s, silver hair, wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo, stepped inside with two assistants flanking him. He scanned the room quickly, then his eyes landed on our table. On Adelaide. His entire posture changed. He walked straight toward us, moving with purpose. When he reached the table, he stopped in front of Adelaide and inclined his head with a respect that was impossible to fake. "Miss Monroe," he said, his voice low but clear. "We've been looking for you. The board is waiting in the main hall." The entire section of the ballroom went dead silent. Clinton's face drained of color. I heard him mutter under his breath, "Miss Monroe?" The silver-haired man turned slightly and looked at him. His expression was polite, but there was steel underneath. "Yes," he said. "Adelaide Monroe, CEO of Monroe Hospitality Group, the new owner of this hotel." A ripple of whispers moved through the room like a wave. People who had been ignoring her all night suddenly couldn't stop staring. The same people who had called her names behind her back were now sitting up straighter, adjusting their ties, trying to look like they had known all along. Adelaide rose from her chair, slowly, deliberately. She smoothed the front of her dress, placed her napkin on the table, and turned to face Clinton. He tried to speak. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. It was just—" She cut him off with a single look. "I know you didn't know who I was," she said, her voice quiet but carrying across the space between them. "And that's exactly why tonight matters." Clinton's mouth opened, then closed. Adelaide didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You let yourself be cruel," she continued, "because you thought I was nobody." The words landed like a blade, clean, precise, and far more devastating than any shout could have been. Clinton stood there, frozen, while the weight of what she had just said settled over the entire room. And for the first time all night, he had nothing left to say. Clinton tried to recover. He forced a laugh that sounded thin and desperate. "You misunderstood. It was just a joke. Everyone here understood the vibe. We were just having a little fun." Adelaide looked at him, not with anger, not with tears, just with a quiet certainty that made the air around them feel heavier. "No," she said. "A joke is only a joke when the person it's aimed at can laugh too." The words landed softly, but they cut deeper than anything loud could have. The entire section of the ballroom went still again. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. Clinton's smile faltered completely. Adelaide turned to the silver-haired man who had addressed her as Miss Monroe. "George," she said, her voice calm and professional, "I want the full guest list from this side hall tonight. I also want the name of the maintenance company currently under contract with the hotel." And by tomorrow morning, I want a complete report on how guest conduct and contractor behavior are being handled at every Monroe hospitality event. George nodded without hesitation. Yes, ma'am. Clinton's face went from red to pale in the space of a few seconds. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time all night, he looked small. Two men in dark suits appeared at the edge of the room. They didn't rush. They didn't make a scene. They simply walked over to Clinton, spoke to him quietly, and escorted him toward the exit. He didn't resist. He couldn't. Not with every eye in the room now watching, and just like that, he was gone. The laughter that had followed him all night didn't follow him out. Adelaide didn't sit back down immediately. Instead, she turned to face the rest of the room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The silence was already complete. This hotel has beautiful chandeliers, she began, her tone even. Expensive wine, perfectly arranged tables, but real luxury isn't in any of those things. She let her gaze move slowly across the faces turned toward her. Real luxury is how you treat people you believe can't do anything for you. It's whether you still choose kindness when there's nothing to gain from it. No one spoke. A few people looked down at their plates. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The same guests who had whispered about her earlier now couldn't hold her gaze for more than a second. She didn't linger. She didn't need to deliver a longer speech. The point had already been made. As the room slowly began to return to its earlier rhythm, though much quieter now, Adelaide turned back to our table. I was still standing where I had risen earlier, unsure of what to do with my hands or where to look. She stopped in front of me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The noise of the ballroom felt distant, like it belonged to another night entirely. Then she spoke. Caleb, she said, my name sounding different coming from her than it had from anyone else that night. Do you know something? I shook my head slightly. What? Tonight you didn't save me. The words surprised me. I started to respond, but she continued before I could. You just reminded me that I don't have to keep sitting still. Something in my chest tightened. I didn't know how to answer that. I had only done what felt right in the moment. I hadn't thought of it as saving anyone. I had simply refused to be another person who looked away. Adelaide reached into her small clutch and pulled out a single silver-wrapped mint. It looked ordinary, the kind you might find in any hotel lobby, but the way she held it made it clear it wasn't ordinary to her. I've carried these with me since the accident, she said quietly. After the crash, my mother used to give me one every time I felt like I couldn't keep going. She would say, something small can still remind you that you're still here. She turned the mint over in her fingers once, then looked up at me. Tonight, when you pulled that chair over and sat beside me, I remembered what she meant. I looked at her, really looked, not at the CEO who had just quietly dismantled an entire room's pretense, not at the woman the city had labeled and discarded, not at the heiress who had fallen and risen again. I just saw her, a person who had spent years holding herself together with nothing but quiet strength and small silver mints. A woman who had every reason to become bitter but hadn't. A woman who had walked into a room full of people who wanted to see her break and still chose to stay. And for the first time all night, I felt like I was seeing the real Adelaide Monroe. She didn't smile, not fully, but the look in her eyes was softer than it had been when I first sat down. Less guarded, less alone. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words didn't come. So I just stood there with her, while the rest of the ballroom continued its performance around us. And for once, I didn't feel like I needed to fill the silence. Because this silence was ours. The morning after the gala, Clinton was suspended. By the end of the week, he was gone. Not because Adelaide demanded revenge, there were simply too many witnesses, too many people who had suddenly remembered exactly what they had seen and heard. The company couldn't ignore it anymore. He lost his job quietly, the same way he had tried to make Adelaide disappear that night. I thought that would be the end of it. A strange night. A right choice at the right moment. A quiet thank you. Then we would all go back to our lives. But 3 weeks later, I got a call from the Monroe Hospitality corporate office. Adelaide wanted to see me. I went to her office with my guard up. I figured she needed a statement for the internal report, or maybe she wanted to thank me in person so she could move on. I wore the only decent button-down I owned and tried not to look like I was nervous. Her office was on the top floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She was already waiting when I arrived. No assistant, no small talk. She simply placed a thick folder on the desk between us. On the cover, printed in clean black letters, were the words, "The Second Key Project." I opened it slowly. Inside were photos of old abandoned houses scattered around the edges of the city. Some near existing Monroe hotels, others in quieter neighborhoods. The proposal was simple but ambitious. Buy the houses, renovate them completely, and turn them into temporary housing for families who had lost everything in the fires, or for hotel staff going through their own crises. A second key. A second chance. Adelaide watched me read. "I need someone to lead the technical side," she said. "Not someone who knows how to talk in board meetings. I need someone who can walk into a house and know which roof is going to leak before the first rain. Someone who understands what makes a place actually safe for people to live in. And someone I trust to hand the keys to the right families." I closed the folder. "I'm not qualified for something like this," I told her honestly. "I fix hotel systems. I don't run projects." She looked at me like I had said something ridiculous. "You didn't know who I was that night," she said. "You still chose to sit down. That's the kind of person I want on this project." I didn't answer right away. I needed 2 days to think about it. 2 days of walking through my own small apartment, wondering if I was about to step into something too big for me. In the end, I said yes. The months that followed were the busiest of my life. We started small, one house at a time. I spent my days checking foundations, rewiring old electrical systems, replacing rotting floors, reinforcing roofs, and making sure every kitchen and bathroom actually worked. Adelaide came to the sites more often than I expected. Sometimes she brought coffee at 6 in the morning. Sometimes she stayed late while I fixed a light in her office that had been flickering for weeks. We talked, not just about work, about her father, about the years after everything fell apart, about how hard it had been to stop seeing herself the way the city saw her. I told her about my own quiet years, about how I had always assumed a guy like me would never belong in rooms like the one we met in, about the parts of myself I had kept small on purpose. One afternoon in early spring, we handed the keys to the first completed house to a woman who had lost everything in one of the fires. She was in her 40s, holding her daughter's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. When I placed the keys in her palm, she started crying so hard she couldn't speak. Adelaide stood beside me the entire time. I glanced over and saw her eyes were red too. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She nodded but didn't look away from the house. "I was just thinking," she said, "how something that was once abandoned can still become someone's home." I turned to her. "People too," I said. Adelaide looked at me for a long time. Then she smiled. Not the polite smile she used in meetings. Not the careful one she had worn the night we met. This one was real, small, warm. The kind of smile that said she finally believed it might be true. A few weeks later, on a late afternoon, we stood in front of that same first house. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the freshly painted porch. Most of the crew had already left for the day. It was just the two of us. Adelaide reached into her pocket and pulled out the small silver mint she had shown me that night at the gala. She turned it over in her fingers once, then looked at me. "You know, Caleb," she said, "my whole life, I've met plenty of people who pulled out a chair for me out of politeness." She paused, her eyes steady on mine. "But you were the first one who pulled the chair right next to me." I didn't have an answer for that. I didn't need one. So I just stood there with her, the two of us side by side, while the light slowly faded around the house we had helped bring back to life. No crowd, no chandeliers, no one watching. Just two people who had once been placed inside someone else's joke, and with one small choice had started writing a different story.